Avgústínaz, just maybe 45 minutes ago, we were on a panel and we were just discussing war reporting, and halfway through we decided to talk about storytelling because the panel was such a diverse set of people. There was filmmakers and photo editors, and from all of us, maybe you were the proper war reporter because of your experience. You've only just recently, you've been in Artsakh during the war in 2020, you've been in Ukraine. And we were trying to have this more, I don't know to what extent we succeeded, more honest and open and behind the scenes kind of discussions, whereas if someone would take up arms instead of put down their camera, if someone, or what would you do, or how much guilt you carry. One subject that we touched upon but we didn't expand on was, is there a balance, or how do you find that balance between risking your life and the content you produce, or the value of the content you produce? Because this we started and we didn't open up about this. Do you think about that, and is that in any way an indication for yourself as to how you evaluate your work?
I remember my colleague who kind of brought me into this war reporting, the guy, the photographer, that gave a trust in this 20-something years old kid and brought me to East Ukraine first. It wasn't that active conflict, but it was a test. For me, it was also to find out, can I do this kind of job? And then it also answers the question, yeah. Because I was always thinking, I want to be a war reporter, but then what does it mean? And then when you're there, it's quite easy to figure out, are you up for the task? And so on. And he told me this thing, and it stuck to me, and I keep repeating it to myself, and then I heard it from other journalists as well. There is no story worth dying for, and I think about it quite a lot, you know. And also on the panel we discussed it in what is personal and what is not personal, and you talked also about you know, your own experience. And I think when you're in a foreign country, in another country, when you don't have this do or die thing, then I think it's important to answer yourself this question: is this story worth dying for? Some stories are worth dying for, I'm sure, but it's important to keep it in mind. And yeah, I always keep it in myself as a reminder. But risk management itself, it's a big task.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a big task.
Because, for example, what I experienced during the war with a lot of my colleagues from Armenia is that we talked about this briefly as well. Almost like the shame of having protective gear on whereas the population doesn't. So the next Armenian next to you is not protected, and all of a sudden you're showing it because your profession demands it at one point. But then when the barriers are mixed, if you're there as a journalist or as an Armenian journalist or as an Armenian because you can, and this also extends to especially to fixers at this point, right? Because in their case it's even more mixed up. So you don't think about caution at all, or your personal safety, or what could happen to you. And I have the story I'm going to tell you. My colleague, we were together, Eric Grigorian. We were at the Cultural Center in Shushi. After it was bombed, we were filming there again, and then the sounds really started coming near. And at this point, I'm like, okay, they're not near enough for us to consider leaving at this point. And Eric wouldn't budge. He wouldn't leave. And he had 2 more photos he knew he needed to take, And it was very difficult with him because I was always the one saying, let's go. Not because I was afraid more, or maybe I was so cautious. And then months later, he was going to go into an MRI. And he said, Rubina, please come with me. I'm not comfortable being in closed spaces. And at this point, I'm like, well, when you were in Shushi, what did you think was going to happen? He was saying, I thought I might die. And all the other options, being trapped on the rubble for days, becoming paralyzed, being hurt, didn't occur to him almost. And I think it's almost the same for all of us. We thought it was we either die or we make it out. And all the other options, which are equally tragic in a lot of cases, like we didn't even consider. So do you wonder what you don't consider? We directly talk about, is any story worth dying for, but is there like lesser story that's worth being hurt for.
To be honest, when I was planning my trip to Artsakh during the war, I was a bit there was lots of things to be stressed about, but I was a bit afraid to be too reckless. I was like, I knew myself. I knew that I will go, because of the pressure, because I need to prove. I have a trust of my editors on my shoulders to show something, and I knew that my risk assessments would be bad. So that's actually why I started talking with my colleague, let's go together, because I knew that this guy is very cold-minded, he's gonna hold me if it's necessary, and I'm gonna push him if I need to,
So you had that dynamic, which is kind of a safety net kind of a thing.
Yeah, because I think if you work alone, that sometimes it can get very tricky in the situations. I hear this story about the polar explorer who was traveling on foot through the Antarctic, and he did it together with the person, and he succeeded. And then he decided to go alone because he said, when you're crossing together, it's never 100% your decision. It's always two people deciding. So he decided to go alone. And at the end, he didn't finish. He didn't make it. And I think that's a good lesson sometimes, to be too reckless. Sometimes it's good to talk about, and recently to Ukraine as well, I went with my colleague who was, in a way, he was way more guy who plans, and he assessed risk way more, and then at some points he struggled to maybe make a decision, and I could push him. What, we have to do it. This is worth risking, and this is worth you crossing your red line. Sometimes. So I think this kind of dynamic is very good in a team.
Sometimes has to hold the next person back, and sometimes you need to push the other person.
I think that's a good way to work in this.
Well, I actually did make this. It was kind of towards the end, and Eric wanted to go to Sushi. We were in Stepanakert. We could still access Sushi, and I didn't know my limit as to. And I said, listen, I'm working at the hospital in Stepanakert. You want to go to Sushi? Go to Sushi. And I was thinking, I'm holding him back. I don't want to go to Sushi. He should go if he wants to, because this is kind of what he wants to do right now. I don't want to step on his feet. The most interesting thing, because we ended up talking about this, is that he didn't go. He came back and says, Rubina, did you think it was dangerous? That's why you didn't want to go. I said, yeah, I felt uncomfortable going. He's like, then why were you telling me to go if I wanted to? Why didn't you tell me don't go? So even that is a kind of an experience to know that you also have the right to say don't go, because he's much a seasoned photojournalist. He's been through much more than I am. He's covered internationally disasters. So I figured I shouldn't stop him. But then the other thing actually worked. He's like, why didn't you tell me not to go?
and I could relate to that as well, but not only the risk thing, but I remember the same guy I worked in Stepanakert with, the photographer, and we were going, it was late afternoon, and he agreed, he talked with some locals to spend the night together with them in the shelter. And we were walking, it's like, all right, let's go, let's spend the night there. And at that time, I felt psychologically down. At some point, it's just too much. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't want to go. And at first, what do you mean you don't want to go? I said, I really need a break. I really need to have a time, just, a bit of the wind in my ears. And, it put us in this weird situation, because I felt that maybe he needs me in this situation as well, So it was kind of this, what are you going to do? Are you going to put your own mental state just to help this other person? Yeah, it's this dynamics. At the end, he went alone, and he did well, and I had my time, which was necessary to sustain, to hold on and stay longer. So, yeah, it's this always game.
It's a very tricky thing, and I think we're going to talk about we're talking about relations at this point, and how different relationships actually work and help each other out. It's a kind of a confession I'm going to make right now, because it was the first time we were working in the Stepanakert hospital, and we had finally had access, and
it was pretty tricky,
which was really very tricky. Meanwhile, we would be there like street dogs in the front, but you see all these foreign journalists go in and come out, but we wouldn't be, which is something we can also talk about. And then finally we have access, and we're there, and the first wounded soldier comes in an ambulance, and we just like all rush in. And we go into the emergency room, and this big guy, foreign journalist, is just standing there in the middle with the camera and not moving. And then I look around, and I see my colleagues are under the walls. They're not moving. They're like on their tiptoes. They're not thinking, okay, like, let me see if I can do something from here, but they're not moving. So I start getting upset. I'm saying, why are you shaving away precious minutes from the nurse's way, from the doctor's way, they're saving what your presence here is not necessary. You're taking moments away from that matter for this guy, right? So I just couldn't like stay there. I'm like, I'm getting out of the way, at least one less person. I don't need to personally photograph this, even though we had worked weeks to get access. So I come out, and then this guy comes out, and I don't know how to react to him. What I did, I can't believe I'm saying this on camera. What I did was very childish. He sat down to smoke, and as soon as he left, because he had also left his cigarette, like IQOS things, electronic cigarette things, I threw them away on purpose. I'm just also saying that reactions and the way you think and the way you feel, and also his partner, like he had this like a female partner, like she was a journalist as well, she was there, and one day I saw her crying, and I immediately sympathized with her, thinking she sympathizes with what she's seen. And then I asked her, are you okay? She's like, yeah, just allergies. And then the ridiculousness of the emotional, pointless emotions basically you go through for reasons that have nothing to do with your story, and then how also they kind of influence your outlook, are very, very weird.
I can tell you also, confess some weird moments during the Artsakh war. I had this my girlfriend from Belgium, and she told me, all right, you're going to the war zone, you have to call me, you have to keep me updated. Well, there is no network sometimes, like it's pretty tricky to call. But she insists, like, you have to, so I called her in the middle of the night, hey, I'm all right, we're working and so on. And then, the sirens turn on, and I say, you know what, I need to go to the shelter right now. And I just dropped the phone and I went hiding. And I came out, and like, all right, it's fine. And I see her, like you expect that she would send a message, hey, are you all right? No, she was super angry at me. She's like, how can you leave me in this situation, without knowing what's going on? She's like, Jesus Christ, I'm here like trying to stay. But also talking about other journalists, yes, sometimes it's, for example, for us Lithuanians, it's difficult to work. It was weird working with Russian journalists next to us. And there was some, you meet each other, hey, what kind of outlets do you work? Russia Today, ooh, all right. And where are you from? From Lithuania, all right. But, at the same time, what kind of, I liked, because there was this solidarity of the journalists. All right,
yes,
I know we're on the different camp, and maybe in different situations we might be even enemies at some point, but now we're doing this together, so let's just, So actually there was a moment where we actually helped each other logistically and so on, and it was
yes,
moments where you really put it aside.
It's like from sharing food, and one time we had to get out of Artsakh, and the way we organized it, we decided to group up a couple of journalists in each car, follow each other, not too closely, so that one could help the other if anything. We did have that kind of support, and it's something we should continue talking about. We tell the stories, but then we don't tell the stories of the stories. Maybe that's also of value. Thank you.
Thank you.